Hey there, it is Jordan Chariton live, Status Coup. It is Friday, what's today, December 6th, the year 2024, right here in the United Corporations of America. Uh, Obviously, a lot going on and a lot of focus right now on the healthcare CEO who was gunned down and murdered, which I've been covering. Just posted another video a couple hours ago on that. But I do not want to forget, what has sadly become another corporate sacrifice zone, this one in Georgia, right near Atlanta, where at the end of September, there was a chemical plant fire at a plant named Biolab. It does not make bioweapons, it makes pool treatments. But as a result of that chemical fire, there was a massive cloud that spread of chlorine gas and other chemicals that we don't yet fully know about, that has made people sick in the immediate area, but also in the far away area, to the point where people have had to move, including one of the people I'm going to speak to today. Joining me now, let me bring you in here. Colin is not with me today, so apologies for any tech issues. Joining me now is Hannah, as well as Christina. You guys live in the nearby area, not right in Conyers, but I believe within 10 or so miles.
Yes, Hannah, I was about 20 miles, I guess from ground zero, from Biolab, I was about 20 miles.
Mhm. And you guys, even though it happened in Conyers, tell us kind of the immediate how you found out about it. This spread well beyond Conyers, right into your backyards.
So I'll just go ahead and start off with how I found out about it. I woke up that Sunday morning relatively early, not a normal time for me. It was around 5:30, and I couldn't go back to sleep, so I just got on social media and I started scrolling, and I saw people were posting that Biolab was on fire again. So let me let me just start off by saying this is their fourth fire. Um, they had one in 2004, 2016, 2020, and now 2024. I've been exposed to all four fires. I am now going back and possibly relating some of the things that I've been through to the first fire in 2004, because I was only maybe like 5 or 6 miles away. At that time, I was actually in high school, which was a very long time ago. But I don't really remember it being as big as it was this time.
And you're
And
saying, just so people know, there was how many fires before this one?
before this one, there was three.
Wow.
This was their fourth. And
And
I,
do you-
I, I would say this was their biggest. If I had to sit down and lay them all out, I would say this would be their biggest one that they ever had. I could be wrong. But
and for you, Christina, how far do you live? And how quickly did you start to experience some health symptoms?
Like I said, I lived about 20 miles from ground zero. And then it was probably because I had heard about it, but I was out working that day. I was out and about running errands. So I was in it, but the chemical cloud kind of came our way. And so by that evening, my eyes were burning. I had all the symptoms. I had a headache. By that evening, I could tell that it was inside the home that I was in. And so that's when I decided to evacuate.
And what were you being told, if anything? Because you're not right in Conyers, but from your community, your city,
Yeah.
were they communicating with you at all that you should leave, or
You
basically?
know, I was getting the text message notifications, that were saying shelter in place and Rockdale, or evacuate, or I was just, I I was confused as to what was happening, but I knew it was bad, and I knew that I wasn't going to stay there, especially if chemicals are in my home and I can feel and taste them. I'm not staying. So at that point, I chose to evacuate. And so that's what I did.
And do you have any kids at home that were experiencing anything?
I do, they were not there. I do have children, but they were not there at the time I evacuated, actually, to my daughters in McDonough, which I thought would be far enough. Actually, the chemical plume followed me to McDonough probably the next day.
Wow. See there on screen, and again, I'm handling the text, so if it's bumpy, apologize. Colin's got his anniversary with his wife today, so enjoy. But there is that Inferno that I was seeing messages as far as Alabama that they were seeing and smelling chlorine gas. So for you, Christina, I know Hannah, unfortunately, you're still there, but Christina, you've had to leave at certain points. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I tried to go back home, I took my sister with me, and we tried to go back, and kind of just assess, like, okay, how bad is this? But she went with me, and she spent the night, but she was like, this is bad. Like, it's burning my eyes, it's my nose, she was having symptoms. And so I was like, I'm just gonna have to pack my things and go. Like, my eyes were burning still. And so we just at that point packed up. I packed my cat and we got out. We just had to go. Um,
And Hannah, could you talk about, because this is not your first rodeo, you don't live right in Conyers, but you know the county, you know who the players are. They were sending out emergency alerts, I believe, like within a day or two, basically saying, yeah, it's chlorine gas, it's chlorine. They didn't mention gas, but you know it won't it won't impact most people, whatever that meant. But the county, correct me if I'm wrong, the county owns the building.
Correct.
And like you said, there's been 3 other fires. Do we know after these other fires, did the county make Biolab, you know, do anything? Tighter regulation? Do we know all the chemicals that were in there? It sure seems to me like this is like local wild, wild west where, it's a small town, but there's not really a lot of enforcement going on. Because one fire, okay, a second fire, you might want to close the plant down until they get their stuff together.
So I just recently saw that this morning, I think I was researching it, that they've now had 18 OSHA violations since 2004.
18.
If you're a company, because my husband has a small business, if you're a company, you want to have 0 OSHA violations. So to have 18 violations within 10 years tells you something right there. Now,
Yeah.
I was a little different. I was affected the day of the fire. I told you, I was made aware via social media. And then I have the police scanner app on my phone. So I went over there and started listening to the chaos, if you want to call it that, that was going on over there. And then we had planned to have, because it was September 29th, into September, fall starting, right? So we had planned to have a fun-filled family fall Saturday, because that's when all the fall, like the festivals were starting, and we were going to go out and just have fun that day as a family. And when we got word that it was on fire again, we knew, okay, we have to stay inside, because that's basically what you do every time when Biolab's on fire. You just stay inside until they get it under control. Well, then when we realized it was much bigger than what they were saying, and then I immediately was affected. Like I said, I heard that the wind had shifted, but I was like, hopefully it doesn't come this way. But it did, and I went to the gas station to get, which I have a 3-year-old daughter, who was affected 2 days later. When I went to the gas station and I turned the corner, that chemical cloud was in front of me.
Wow.
And I saw the bright orange red color, and I'm like, that's not like the normal color kind of fire that they have.
And were you in town at the time, or you were out of
No,
town?
it was 13 miles away.
Okay. So even 13 miles away, what was your immediate symptoms?
I immediately started feeling my my heart rate going like faster. I felt lightheaded, dizzy. I had trouble breathing. Blurred vision. I thought I may have been having maybe, because I had asthma as a child, and then they said I outgrew it, and then I've kind of had some lung things going on for a little while, but nothing like too crazy or serious. So then when I got all the way home, this all happened within a time span of like 7 minutes. When I
Wow.
got home, I felt like I was suffocating and I couldn't even speak. Like I could mentally process what I needed to say, but I couldn't get it out. And at that point,
And before this, you had some minor things, but nothing like this.
correct. So my husband was like, something's wrong with her. I need to call 911. And so he did. And they came and picked me up and took me up there. And the doctor that treated me that night was already aware of the chemical, well, at least 3 of the chemicals that were in that cloud. Because at one point during that day, they were going to be sending certain patients from Rockdale Hospital to Walton, which is the county I live in. But then they decided it was too dangerous to do that. And so they just cut the air off in the hospital.
Wow.
So the doctor that treated me, thank God, he already knew because they had briefed them on what chemicals they kind of pretty much knew that it was at that point. And then that's when he told me, he basically told me that the bromine that was in the cloud, which was, like I said, the orangish reddish color, was making the mucus build up in my esophagus and in my throat. So it felt like I was suffocating, but I wasn't like literally suffocating.
Mhm.
And so that had to be stopped like immediately. And that was stopped with the Benadryl and the steroid, I believe. But then I went back a couple times after that too. And then 2 days later on that Tuesday, my 3-year-old daughter started showing signs. She came up to me and said, "Mommy, I'm itchy." And that's not something that a child can just make up out of thin air. So I immediately knew then she's been affected, and this is way bigger than what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're like fixing this, because they made it almost seem like they didn't know what they were even doing.
And this image, by the way, just so people know, you sent to me. This is overhead by Stone Mountain,
Mhm.
which is, I believe, over a half hour from this plant. So, I mean, look at that.
It's
I
on
mean, look at
that picture right there would be like if you were in Atlanta looking down towards Conyers right there. So that's
so,
what you can see from Atlanta.
wow. And that's how far?
Atlanta, give or take, I don't know, 20, 30 miles.
Wow. And because you know the players after these other fires, was it just kind of like, all right, they had a fire, we're cleaning it up, you're all fine, back back to business? In this case, they couldn't really do that because you were seeing it over the highway. This was going on for weeks, and they're still, even though it is now, we're talking over 2 months later, you and I have been talking, they've been doing what you would call off gassing, which uh, they're still sending out gas into the community when they're off gassing. Can you kind of talk about what you know of that they've been doing still?
Well, I know that what was left of like the chemical like makeup of what they were trying to remove was super shock, and they had it. When it comes to them, it comes in like, I'm not 100% sure about this, but from what I've researched, 2,750 pound sacks, and then that's what they manufacture, I guess, whatever. So I think I sent you the picture of it, of the sacks that were still there, like a week or two later, that they had tried to put water on. I guess you would consider that a control burn. And that's when it made more, whatever it is. I don't know, maybe gas, I guess.
This is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, so all those little bitty white specks, those are each like little, let's say 3,000 pound bags of super shock. So if you have a pool, you only use super shock when your pool's like almost green. So when you have that much super shock in one area and you go to spray water on that, when you put super shock in your pool, it it dissolves and it's kind of like a poof, and it kind of goes away and runs through your jets and drains and all that. So when you put water on it in big magnitudes, it's going to continue to produce a gas. So I don't know when, but they finally realized, I think we need to stop doing that and let it just, I guess, kind of do it itself.
Right.
And you know, here we are. We're at December 6th, and you know, I got a video the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. I got a video from somebody showing where it was still off gassing into the air.
And I was talking to you the other day because there was a community meeting. You had folks from East Palestine, Ohio come down who are dealing with their own still ongoing contamination or nearly
Right.
2 years later. But I was talking to you and you said, like, yeah, I guess people are going, but the people I know are too sick to go. Can you, both of you, can you kind of talk about, I mean, you don't live right in Conyers, but we're talking about people live 10 miles, 13 miles, 20 miles further that have ongoing symptoms, yet I don't see any like program for testing going on for people. You have to go to your own personal doctor. Most regular doctors are not equipped to deal with like chlorine gas. I know Scott Smith, who's an independent tester, has been conducting testing. He has said that he has found very, very high levels of dioxin, which was found in East Palestine. These are very hazardous chemicals. In one case, decades ago in Missouri, Times Beach, they had to evacuate the town. It's now a ghost town because of dioxins. But it just kind of seems like people are, for the most part, being left to fend for themselves.
They are. Yeah. I know when I went to the doctor, I started at the urgent care doctor, and I was prescribed basically an anxiety pill and a steroid. And that didn't sit right with me, first of all, because I knew it was toxic poisoning. I actually ended up in the hospital, and I thought I was having a stroke because of the symptoms that I was having. I was disoriented, eyes burning, just feeling absolutely weak, and I did pass out actually at one point. And so, yeah, the doctors didn't really know what to do with that at all.
Wow. And do you have, whatever you want to share, but do you have any previous health issues that are that severe?
I mean, I have a few underlying things, but nothing severe. They did check me. They did an MRI. They thought, well, maybe it was a stroke, so they did the MRI, but they were like, we don't know, go home. We don't know how to treat this, which, you can't blame them because it's not every day that this happens.
Right. And for you, were you hearing anything from, your town government, your city council? What was the communication, with your politicians on this?
For me,
Yeah.
um, no, I didn't. I at that point, I didn't. It was just evacuate or shelter in place, and by that point, I was gone. I wasn't concerned with that. I just had to focus on my health at that point. I was in the hospital and just trying to figure out where I was going to go to get away from the chemicals.
Right. So have you gone back or are you still away
Um,
from your home?
I am away. I decided I can't go back, and so I am living currently about 100 miles from where I was, kind of in North Georgia. And I did go back to get my items out of my home. And the day that I was there, I got down there and I could tell the air, it wasn't the same. And then I walked in the house and I could feel, it just didn't feel, I could just tell. I don't know if that makes sense. And like when I touched my items, I was moving all my items out. I don't know, it was just kind of itchy touching a few of them. So
Hmm.
after all that
And
time.
I don't know where you're staying now, but I mean, you still got to pay your mortgage or wherever you live. So it's not cheap to relocate.
Exactly, exactly. You know, and it was time away from work, being sick in the hospital. And so it was a loss. The chemicals were actually in my car. Um,
I actually was just about to show a picture of that. Can you tell us? This looks like some type of filter here. What's that?
so yeah, that's my air filter. We changed out the air and the cabin filter. And so thinking that that might make it better, because every time I would get in my car, I would get these awful, awful headaches. Um, and so I did those things, and it didn't help. And so what I've determined is it's in the HVAC system of my car.
Yeah, that looks like some gunk in there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And like my paint on my car, I think that it's chipping. My tires, I'm just, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And it's got to be concerning for you, but your kids too, because you don't really know what they've
Well,
been exposed to.
well, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And Hannah, can you kind of talk about, because it seems to me there was a community meeting a couple days ago, like you said, you others just weren't feeling good enough to go. There was no executives from Biolab there. It seems that it's really just kind of like nonprofit activists that are kind of getting involved, and residents getting involved. I don't know if any like Rockdale County politicians were there, but it just seems like this is kind of like, you know, the citizens are fending for themselves, and they said there was going to be some type of investigation into what happened, but I'm not particularly hearing much about it. I would still like Biolab to release all the chemicals that were in there.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of a lot. I mean, we as I guess you would just say now it's almost statewide. I mean, I've got another friend that lives in Morgan County, which is like 40 miles away. But his doctors are in Conyers, so every time he comes back to Conyers, he gets sick. I had to go to Conyers to the doctor the other day. I got a little bit sicker than I already was. It's hard to explain how it happens and what happens. It just kind of comes on like I call it a chemical attack when it happens. But as far as like community people and residents and stuff like that, I think that it's just a bunch of people that are trying to get together um, and get this information out there, try to get them like shut down or get their license pulled so they can like close doors, because they say they're not manufacturing, but I mean, why would they even be open if they're not manufacturing? That's what they do. So I can't remember exactly what day it was, but there was one day, I think it was on a Thursday, the county basically relinquished their responsibilities from Biolab, or the whole Biolab fire. And then the next day, the county turned around and sued Biolab. And so it's kind of the word that I've heard lately and I've learned is the word playbook. Um, and that it happened the same way in East Palestine. It happened, in Times Beach. Like, it's not like it's a literal, almost like book that they pull out when there's a big disaster, and they're like, we do this for so many days, and then we do this, and then we turn around and sue this person. And it's just, no one has apologized, for one. No one, the only thing they've really said is they're gonna try to fix their mistakes or whatever. No, I mean, no, if I could be wrong. I mean, there could be, an apology somewhere, but I learned growing up when you were little, if you did something wrong, you say you're sorry.
Right.
And
Well,
nobody,
it's also beyond an apology. Like, people need to get testing. They
Yeah.
should have they should have health care paid for.
Yeah.
by the company or the government.
So you
Uh,
say that. So my primary, he was working with a group or company or something, because they're all of the medical professionals in and around Rockdale are being left in the dark.
wow.
So they don't know what to do. I went yesterday and he told me, he's like, look, I don't know what else to do. We've done everything, that we can, the testing, and this. He's like, we don't even know what we're testing for. So, I mean, that was kind of like scary, to be honest.
And just the way.
Meaning they don't know all the chemicals that were in the plant or all the chemicals that.
It's like they're not releasing like what all it was. Like, at least tell the doctors, like tell the local doctors. Like the doctors don't even have to tell us what they're testing us for. Like, just tell local doctors what they need to do to help their patients.
Right.
Because this is, we're sick. I mean we're sick. It's I left town 3 times to kind of just see, hey, maybe it's for the best. And yeah, it was for the best. Do I need to move? Yeah. But where am I going to move? Because, I mean, you look at the map around the United States. I mean, there's not really a lot of places that you can go that doesn't have super funds, or I can't think of that other word right now, but some kind of contamination that has either happened or is happening or is near, somewhere that produces something that could possibly blow up one day. It's not.
Well, also, I remember I've been covering Flint for almost a decade, and I've had residents say, well, why am I going to move to just be poisoned somewhere else? The water is
Right.
bad. The water's bad in so many other places, and I want to be made whole. They should fix it here. So,
Right.
you know, and it's also, it's becoming concerning. I mean, if you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're kind of SOL right now in America. Um, also, want to ask about um, the testing that's being done. Are you aware of if the county health department is doing widespread testing? I mean, I know there's independent testing, but are
We
they?
don't know.
Because it's not just the air. You got to, there's farming around here. So
Mhm.
soil could have contamination that then goes into food.
Yep, absolutely.
And in the water.
Right.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, we don't know. The numbers that the EPA showed us were nowhere near the numbers that were actually the numbers.
Which is also a common playbook where the EPA in Flint and East Palestine and many other places I've covered, they seem to get very low levels that are under their quote action level, which, to dumb it down for people, their action level is for individual chemicals. So like lead, they have an action level of concern, but you're not dealing with individual chemicals. You're dealing with combustion of, we don't know how many chemicals because they're not releasing all the chemicals that were there. So it's not just, by the way, the media was reporting it as chlorine is in the air. Well, it's chlorine in the form of gas. Chlorine gas was used in World War I, as a weapon. Obviously, there's certain levels that make it more toxic, but I don't know what the levels were that were released. It's been outlawed in war because it was used as a weapon of war. But the media and Biolab and the government, when they sent out that emergency, they were saying chlorine in the, well, it's chlorine gas. People should know that because not everyone is, people aren't chemists. So it's the short-term symptoms, but also you don't know what the long-term effects are.
And they went back and forth. They kept going back and forth. 1 minute it was safe, 1 minute it wasn't safe. I know a girl that wasn't even a half a mile away who has a baby who was 2, who has asthma, and she needed to go back. She had a break in her house just to get her kids medicine. Like, they were evacuated and then they weren't evacuated. And then they come back at 3 o'clock in the morning, stomping on the door, like busting in their house, telling them they have to leave. Like why?
Right.
Like, what, that wasn't needed. Like, and then like, it was just back and forth alerts. Like, send one alert, tell everybody get out, you know, and then when they did the shelter things or whatever you want to call them, the places where the people that were in the zone could go, when it was time to go to bed, they closed. They didn't have anywhere for them to go, so they had to go home.
And I'm showing now, you sent me a picture of a dead bird, just so people know. People, could say, well, Jordan, birds die sometimes. I mean, there's been many pictures floating around about dead birds in this area, as well as other. There was videos going around after this about, people in the woods saying it's completely quiet, which is not normal for this time of year because animals typically make sounds, but there was
Oh, it was
very
so weird. It was so eerie. That quiet thing that you're talking about, it was so weird because normally you would hear birds chirping, frogs ribbiting, I guess. You would see deer. All we've seen, really, well, now that it's getting cold, we're seeing more deer now. But back when it had first happened, we were seeing wildlife that you wouldn't normally just see on the side of the road. Like I was on I-20, I had to go to Atlanta for an appointment, and there was a coyote on the interstate. Like, and then a couple, like not even like 0.1 mile up, there was like it wasn't a hawk, but it was like a bigger bird. And then a little farther up, there was a deer. So like you don't normally see that much wildlife dead within that far of a radius.
and
And then
also there was yeah, there was video going on about beehives where most of the bees were dead. So
my brother has a service dog, and I'm kind of concerned about him. He's shown sign. He actually took him to the vet, and he had E. coli. Dog hadn't really ever been sick before. Somebody needs to explain to me, like, where did that, like, how did he get E. coli?
right.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news to my brother, because he is disabled. But every time I see his dog, I don't really want to say worse, but he's showing more signs of distress. He is very lethargic. He is not quick to commands. He acts like he's starving, but he's losing weight. It's very, very concerning.
I know my cat was not eating for like a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Hannah, you also told me before you had a friend who lived like 40 miles away who was very sick.
Yeah, that's Jeremy. He lives in Morgan County, but his doctors are in Rockdale County.
Mm-hmm.
So when he has to come to Rockdale and drive up here for certain stuff, he's exposed, and he has, some other underlying issues. But he's just been worse since the fire. And his doctor too, I don't think he would mind me sharing this, but his doctor prescribed him some eye drops, and they ended up being like over $700 for just like one little vial of eye drops, just to try to help with the dry eyes, or that's not right, dry eyes, because it can go either way, I guess. I don't know, Christine, I don't know for you it's the same. It could go, one minute it could be dry, and the next minute your eyes could just be running like you've been crying forever.
Yeah, and my eyes are not so bad now. It kind of the initial, it cleared up, but just I think it's called tilt. That's the scientific name or whatever. But what I'm experiencing is like extreme sensitivity to smells. Like if there's a fire, or if I'm out driving and the exhaust, it's just intense to where it just makes me almost sick.
Mm-hmm.
I
Like
can smell everything.
Yes.
Now. And I never used to be able to smell anything. And now I smell everything. And I'm also having trouble hearing. My husband's like, you don't have to yell. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. And he's like, you're being kind of loud. And I'm like, I don't mean to, do that. It's just I really am having a problem.
And do you know other people who have had to move temporarily?
Yes, we have
I'll be
friends.
back. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a friend, a mutual friend. She's had to evacuate, and yeah, she had to get out, and she's still kind of sick from the symptoms. So,
And I want to read and show this. I have permission from this woman to read this because I'm trying to get her on. She a little tech challenge, but we'll try to get her on next week. Her name is Pippet. I'll show you the images of her face, which is really bad rash. And she lives in Stone Mountain. So she lives over a half hour away. So you could kind of see the rash on her cheeks there. I'll show you also. Um, hold on, her arm. Do, do, do. So you could see her arm here. Those bumps and rash. This is over a half hour away. She was having this. So I'll read you some of her email. It was just really, horrible to hear this. Um, uh, I and my home care aide were both exposed to the Biolab toxins when going out to shop at the Grant Park Farmers Market on Sunday, October 13th. So this was a week and a half, 2 weeks later, between 8 and 8:30. First exposure was in Stone Mountain at the corner of Elam and Roland Road, and a ways down Roland Road, a quarter mile from my house. And the second time was when we drove through Grant Park. Again, I'll put this image up so you can kind of see. Here's side of her face. You can see this rash here. Um, I thought it was over. I thought I was over it a few days later. Both of us got headaches almost right away when we drove through the areas, scratchy throat, irritated eyes, and sinuses. I was sick the rest of the day, feeling like I had the flu. I thought it was over. I thought I was over it a few days later, but then it rained one night. And then the next morning, I went outside to work in my food garden uh, and to pull out roots from part of my yard. When I came inside, I noticed my face and arms were itching really badly, and my face was becoming swollen, which you see there. It seemed to go away by the next morning, so thinking maybe it was just some plant I was allergic to and that the effects were just temporary, I went outside to try and finish the garden work until dark, removing a lot of roots. This time, the reaction was even worse after coming inside. My face looked like a balloon, eyes swollen. Let me show you this again. It's a lot easier when Colin's here, but doing my best here. Image. So you can see, I mean, right on her cheeks, it's particularly bad. Um, she said, this time the reaction was even worse coming inside. My face looked like a balloon, eyes swollen, lips, ears, and face really puffy, and the itching and soreness was unbearable. I also had a red rash on my arms that itched like crazy. It then occurred to me that the rain must have dumped the chemicals in the air into my soil. And when the soil got on me, it caused this reaction. I had done planting in another plot earlier in the week with no ill effects before it rained. From what I've heard, those chemicals released by Biolab are water reactive. So this is probably why I only reacted after it rained. I'm on disability and rely on this food to get me through the month. As buying food is becoming more expensive, I've had to go into debt to buy all the supplies for it, soil amendments, etc. If my land is all contaminated now, that will be disastrous as I won't have enough food to last me. And all the effort and money I've put into this will be for nothing, not to mention my health being at risk now and in the long term. I'm on Medicare and Medicaid, which I doubt covers the type of testing I'll need to find out what chemicals did this to me. I also need to have my soil tested and don't have that kind of money. It seems the only option is to sue. which this kind of goes hand in hand with obviously the dominant story going on right now, which was the healthcare CEO killed and all of millions of Americans reacting like, cry me a bucket. You're denying us healthcare. But that's just one woman, and she's again in Stone Mountain. So we're talking over a half hour away. Face rash, itching, headaches. Have you heard from other people where they're getting rashes and those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, I hear, I talk to people every day, just all kinds of people, that just ask me, hey, I realized now that a month ago you were going through this, what did you do? Because I'm about to go insane. And I said, I mean, I didn't do anything except be a guinea pig for my doctor. I didn't have any pictures, and thankfully they've cleared up. But I had ultimately what you would call burns on the sides of my lips right here. And then it started going on the inside, and it went down and into the back of my throat. And it was bright red, almost like the color of this notebook red. And there was nothing they could do about it. And so finally, my doctor said, let's treat it as a fungal infection. I'm going to call you in a fungal cream. And I can only put it like right here on the outsides, but it cleared it up within a couple of weeks, because it was to a point where it hurt to eat. I couldn't even open my mouth.
Yeah.
And the back of my throat was so red by the time food or even drink got there. It hurt. It hurt.
I had that too, Jordan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unreal. And Hannah, I hear you wrangling your kid there. You've had to leave several times. So we're not just talking about physical problems. We're talking. I mean, I got a 2-year-old. It's hard enough to wrangle her in my house. It's got to be tough coming and going with your kids.
She doesn't understand. Like she doesn't know what's going on. She talks, but she's not able to like really tell me what's going on. Like the past couple of days, she's told me, "Hey, mommy, my tummy hurts." Okay, well, here we go. So we're gonna have to like navigate that. When she says, "Mommy, I itchy," thankfully, finally, her doctor called in almost like a prescription type Benadryl for her, and it makes her sleepy. So I'm like not big on medication, so I only give it to her like when she really, really needs it. But for her to like know kind of sort of what's going on around her, but not really. Like we did not go outside of our house for 28 days. So tell me how you have a 3-year-old and how you tell them they can't go outside. It still is a nightmare. But it's our new normal. So we have to navigate it hour by hour.
And she wasn't going outside, but she was still itchy.
Correct.
Wow.
And when you were talking about the, was it World War II earlier?
World War I, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there was literally one night, probably like a week after the fire happened, that I was itching, and we thought that the best thing to do was just strip down and get in the shower. But then we realized when we did that, like it was one night I was literally just in the shower crying to my husband. I said, if this is what it's like to gas people, this is horrid. This is awful. Like you felt like everything was burning. The water was burning, your body's burning, your insides are burning. And no one understands what's happening because it's not happening to them, or it hasn't happened to them yet. And I don't wish this on anyone. I never would wish anything on anyone to go through something, health-wise. But people need to understand that there are people that are going through this, and this is a real thing, and it is a real problem. And there's way more people that are going through it than are not going through it.
Well, also, and I don't really, it doesn't matter to me what your politics are, But the bottom line is, how many fires is a company allowed to have before they're shut down? I
Right.
mean, you could say to have a business license, particularly if you're an industrial plant, whether it's chemicals or whatever you're manufacturing there, you have to follow regulations. You have to be up to code. Typically, there's inspections. We don't know any information at all about what the regulations are, if they've been following it. If you mentioned the 18 OSHA violations, but what caused the fire? They said it was a sprinkler malfunction. I have a hard time believing that. We don't know what testing they've done. We don't really know. They haven't released
I
all the
mean,
chemicals. It seems that there's not a lot of government enforcement going on down there of this plant, which then begs the question: what other plants are substandard in Georgia and elsewhere that are also where they're not on fire now, but we don't know down the road.
right. And it's, there's a lot of hearsay going around, but I've heard the same story more than one time. So when I hear something more than 3 times, I'll repeat it. And the hearsay story is that they were so understaffed. They were hiring people from a staffing agency, and even if they weren't qualified to drive a forklift, they were putting them on 3rd shift because all they needed were people just to be there. I heard they over ordered because they heard of the dock strike, and when the chemicals came in, the people on 3rd shift didn't know what to do with them.
Well, I can't say that definitively because, of course, I'm not down there talking to people, but I could tell you this is not just to plug my book, but as I reveal in my book that came out recently on Flint, two weeks before they switched to the Flint River 10 years ago, the water plant was so understaffed, not to mention it barely had functioning equipment, that they moved folks over from the Flint garbage department to the water department. No disrespect, to garbage people, but they're not experts in treating water.
Mhm.
So that plant was so understaffed that they were basically moving folks off the garbage trucks to work in the water plant. So a lot of these plants, because a lot of cities are broke, are understaffed, or like you were hearing, maybe they're using people that don't know necessarily or don't have the expertise. Hell, when I covered the John Deere strikes, John Deere was using, like white collar workers to drive their forklifts, and there were crashes. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there are people, the whistleblowers, that knew about this, that, it could have been prevented. I think that, I just think that people knew, and it could have been prevented. I think it's a lot of corruption going on.
Mhm. So, as we wind down here, talk to me. I know I've seen it in all these situations. Community members come forward, people create Facebook pages, then people fight with one another, and there's drama. But there was a meeting the other night. People came out. Do you feel like people are coming together, or there's division over this? What do you guys need? Because I do think there's a lot more attention now. I even see it in my videos because these things are happening, whether it's a railroad blowing up with toxic chemicals, or plants going on fire, or refineries leaking. People are starting to see that, oh, this isn't so far away from me. This could happen to me. What do you guys need from, the rest of America right now?
I think we need people like you that are legit media outlets to share what's really going on, because it's not, we haven't seen local news. I mean, well, I can't say that because I haven't been up there, but I haven't seen anything on the news since the thing the other day. There may have been a couple things that were posted here and there, but as far as like continued coverage, Like, we haven't had any of that. So when you're talking about like the different groups and stuff like that, there are a couple different groups, Facebook groups, you know, websites, stuff like that, that are trying to do the same thing. I think, and come together. But so there's some of us that can't even really leave our homes without being sick. There's some that can go out and they're fine. But I think, you know, everyone kind of needs to set our differences aside, sit down at the table, and lay it all out. And if we're gonna be, you know, I don't really know what the saying is, but it's something about like voices and numbers and whatever. You got a bunch of people will hear you more, you know, stuff like that. You know, if we can get everyone, you know, to come together in one, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, one kind of group or organization, and have, you know, someone who can truly lead us with this, you know. But I really honestly don't think that's going to happen, because I don't think there's anyone that can really tell us, you know, what all was, you know. I really don't think we're ever going to know what was let out that day.
Yeah.
Right.
I really don't. So we're like, what, 2 months out? So we need to use our time, and we need to use our resources together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I also think at the end of the day, you know, this is 40 minutes from Atlanta, which is a major American city.
Oh yeah.
So people, you know, Atlanta was seeing it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether Democrats in office or Republicans in office. The flag behind me is not for dramatic effect. We got corporations running the government, folks.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure the left and the right could agree on that for the most part. And, you know, something's got to be done. I'm not saying go out and gun CEOs. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is this is life or death stuff, because you might not die right away, but we're already starting to see in East Palestine people getting cancers. I've interviewed folks in East Palestine, young women getting dementia at 50, suddenly 30-something-year-olds losing their hair, young children, 6, 7, and 8-year-old girls.
Yeah, that's another thing that I had in the beginning, not so much as now, but I was having a lot of hair loss. You know, along with a bunch of other things. Fortunately, my daughter hasn't had hair loss, but she has had these episodes where she will just, it's not like a toddler tantrum. It's like, you know, something is wrong. And she will literally just sit in the floor and spin in circles with her feet and just cry. And it's the most god-awful cry you've ever heard. And as a mother, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to help her except try to figure out how to maneuver every day. What works for her? What, you know, I've even gone live on my Facebook with like 4 different like creams and sprays and stuff like that have helped her, to try to help other parents that have kids that are going through the same thing.
And this is new. This is not something she was doing before this.
She didn't have any of these issues before this. There are people, that family that have come that don't see her all the time, and they've come and they've seen her, and they're like, wow, she's not her normal self. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to tell y'all that, you know, I'm trying to tell y'all this is very real, what's happening, and it's affecting my kid. And I knew then, when my child, who is 3, came up to me and said, "Mommy, I itchy, help me," I knew then that this was going to be way bigger than what they had said that this was.
Right.
Yeah, it's very real. I think we just want people to know, like, this is a real thing. That's just because everybody's not experiencing all the symptoms, you know, or seeing the effects of different things. It's a real thing. We went through this, and, you know, we're still, some of us, having symptoms. And I treated myself holistically. with like activated charcoal and supplements and vitamins like that. I just didn't feel like the doctors really knew what was going on. So I'm like, let me just treat myself naturally. And after a while, I did feel better.
Mm. And, also I want to mention the media because I'm not down there, but the local media coverage I've seen, you're not covering it by just regurgitating what Biolab or the politicians say. That's not
Exactly.
That's not journalism.
Exactly.
I don't know who owns these local outlets, but I've covered enough stories. Most of these local news outlets are covered by corporations too, and they don't want to lose access to politicians or they don't want to offend their advertisers, or whatever the case may be. But this is very ripe for investigation. To who knew what when. You got 3 other fires over a decade that or beyond a decade actually that this plant has had. So we need to know what safety protocols were put in place or what the local government told them they needed to do after the first fire. We need to know the causes of the fires.
Yeah.
Some of these places, I don't know about here, but some of these places you find, a money trail between the companies and local officials. Some of it legal, some of it not, but all of it pretty shady and doesn't smell right. Kickbacks. So we need to know because people are sick, animals, kids acting differently, and we don't need another corporate sacrifice zone. And frankly, I don't really know. I know they're not operating yet, but I don't really know why it would be even a question if they're allowed to operate again.
Right.
But the thing is, that's what they're saying. Like that's what they're saying, but like they're open. So if you're open, like what are you doing? Like because you guys make pool chemicals from the products that are brought in. So if you're not manufacturing, then what are you doing?
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's what we want to know. We want to know, what are you doing? If you're open, what are you doing?
Right.
Well, we want you
Exactly.
shut down. We want you to stop, to stop all the corruption and to raise awareness and to make people aware and to tell the truth.
And I should have asked, I assume you haven't heard anything from Governor Kemp there?
No, we haven't heard a thing. And I went back and researched a little bit of it. And he was down there with Trump in Augusta after Hurricane Helene for, I can't give an exact amount of time, but it was a long period of time. I haven't heard or seen anything from him, but
I have not.
I could be wrong. No, he was down there with Trump in Augusta.
Interesting.
Very
Okay.
interesting.
Well, I very much appreciate. Go ahead.
Real quick, there being a state of emergency thing, he had already declared a state of emergency because of Hurricane Helene. So therefore, we would have been considered under that state of emergency, but no one ever told us that.
Yeah. Well, we knew we were, but yeah.
Right.
Well,
so
also
technically that we were under that from Biolab. See, I'm starting to itch now. What time is it? 6 o'clock. Yeah. And it's another thing, like with the times of day. I said I would get down to it, and I really haven't gotten down to it. So if anybody has any contacts with a scientist or a meteorologist that can connect all this together for me, with the different times of day and with it being hot and then getting cold, and then you turn your heat on and then it reactivates everything. And then where our friend she was talking about earlier is worried about people that burn firewood. If the firewood's been outside and the chemicals were on the firewood, and then you go to burn the firewood, then you're reigniting all those chemicals inside your house. So it's a whole trail of unknown right now, and we just want to know.
Right.
And it's like questions like, how do you remediate, your HVAC system in your car?
Right.
Like when I took it to my mechanics, they're like, we don't really know how, because they don't know what chemicals all the chemicals are. So like, how do you clean that? Like I wiped down the inside of my car, but I'm still getting headaches. So it's got to be in the HVAC or,
And it could have got in the furnace of homes too.
Exactly. And
Right.
people are just unaware.
Right. Well, I also would say we're starting to see, in a lot of these instances, I remember there's been plastic plants on fire in Indiana. There's been others I've seen where the EPA or the local health department say, "Oh, you know, everything, everything's clear after a half mile." Do the chemicals just is there an
That was
invisible
that was my question.
wall?
Exactly. That was my question. Does it stop at Rockdale County? What about the other counties that are affected? I don't think that it just stops at the county line.
Right. So people need to know whether it's Stone Mountain, which is a half hour away, or even further. I mean, there were people putting on social media in Alabama, they were smelling chlorine. So
Absolutely.
people need to know how far this goes, and I think that's part of the issue here because I think they want to minimize it as far as possible. Because if you start acknowledging that this could go, you know, across state lines, you're opening up yourself to a whole new can of liability legally,
Yeah.
as well as what the government needs to provide. It's one thing if you need to do
And that's
things.
because it was probably like a week after I had somebody that I used to work with message me and said it smells like chlorine here, and she lives in Alabama. I had another friend who had somebody message them, and they live in South Carolina,
Yeah.
and they said it smelled like chlorine outside.
Yeah, when
Wow.
I evacuated to my brother's in Cherokee County, and yeah, I could detect the chemicals.
Wow. I'm sorry for what you guys are going through. I'm going to stay on this. I know that Scott Smith, who's done independent testing in Flint, East Palestine, I know he's also come down there. He's been traveling, but we spoke earlier and he has more results. So I'm going to have him on to go through the results. Um, he uses credible labs and the EPA is shit on him, which to me means he's correct. So we'll find out. But from what I've heard from him, he's seeing higher levels of dioxins than they even saw in East Palestine, which is scary because I was just in East Palestine and they're 2 years later, almost 2 years later, and I got sick both times I've been there. Uh, I went into one woman's house, Ashley. I think she's in the chat.
Yep.
I think I made it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes before the smell was so overwhelming. Um, and there's dioxins there. There's a lot of other chemicals that were created. So, I mean, this is not something the media too often covers it when there's flames, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. But the sickness doesn't go away, and the cover up gets worse when the media goes away. So, anything else you guys want to say before we go?
Let me unmute myself first. Sorry, my husband got home. I would just say if you are around the area and you are having any of these symptoms, that it's okay. You're not crazy. People will probably tell you you're crazy, and people will probably talk bad about you. And I mean, I've been made fun of, and all that. But at the end of the day, it's real, and this is what I'm going through. I can't make this up. Scott came and tested my pool water because I have a pool, and we're waiting on that because I had 2 pool floats that literally like melted. One the day of the fire and one a couple weeks after, and I literally just watched it melt. Sitting out there in the pool with the air and the water and all that. He actually took one of them with him. I don't know if he ended up sending it off to the lab or not, because there was a ring around the bottom that was just black.
Wow.
And I think that would have been the chemicals. Somewhat, I don't really know. I'm not qualified in those areas. I'm a stay-at-home mom, so when it comes to all this stuff, I'm a science nerd. I like stuff like this, but it's a lot, and we're not the only people that are going through stuff right now. So it's hard. And I don't know if it's because I care about everyone or it's just, I don't know. It's to me, my problem is so minute to what's happening in like North Carolina. Like, those people are freezing to death. You know, they
Yeah.
don't even have a house. Like, I have a house. It may be contaminated, but I have a house. You
Right.
know, people that don't. So it's just kind of like one of those things, like, you know, what's happening around us? What's happening? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, I'm a stubborn motherfucker and I'll stay on it. So,
Well, I appreciate you. I really, really do. You know, there's so much more that we could just stay on here and talk about. And I feel like I think you're gonna cover that maybe more later on. There's some really big results coming out tomorrow from Scott. You know, I hope that, you know, I really don't know how people are going to take this because it's relatively severe. So,
yeah.
You know, I wish I could help everybody, but I can't. So, all we can do is continue to tell our story, raise awareness, let people know that it's still happening, it's still going on. Our local media isn't covering it, our local government isn't covering it. I mean, they're moving on to like how carrying on Christmas parades and stuff like that. I mean, that to me, that's insane. Why would you do something like that?
Well, it's you used the term playbook earlier, and it is the same playbook because in East Palestine, Norfolk Southern, who unnecessarily nuked the town, and when I say East Palestine, we're also talking Pennsylvania because people are sick there too. They just paid for an Easter egg hunt. So the media says, "Oh, Norfolk Southern's, you know, there's an Easter egg hunt." Meanwhile, they were sending kids out into a contaminated park for an Easter egg hunt. So a lot of it's kind of like move on with, you know, the holidays or barbecues and you get PR and, you know, around that. And it's kind of the normalization of corporate sacrifice zones. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And a lot of these chemicals, whether it's vinyl chloride or chlorine or whatever it is, dioxins, they don't leave the environment so quick. Certain types of dioxins, I mean, they could stay for hundreds of years, as far as 100 year. Christina, we were just wrapping up. Anything else you want to
Yep.
say?
Yeah, no, just really we need to stay, you know, not get divided and just stay united and just
100%.
raise awareness and come together and just keep fighting to bring the truth.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. I will stay on it and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. So those were two residents. And I think it's important to say because when you see the media cover these situations, whether it's East Palestine or this, of course, ground zero is ground zero. So the people in Conyers, where this lab is, but they're not in Conyers. They're over 10 miles away. And look how sick they are. The woman whose face I showed you, Pippet is her name. I'm going to try to have her on too. She's over a half hour away. So these are not, you know, in East Palestine, some of the sick people I've talked to are miles and miles and miles away from where that train derailed and there was a detonation. So it's really the rust, you know, Norfolk Southern, it's really the Rust Belt chemical disaster. This is really the Georgia chemical disaster, which might go as far as Alabama. And we're not getting answers. We're not getting transparency from the politicians, from the company. And the only people that could get that are who could pressure that is us. But one thing that I think is a positive thing, if there is such a thing in these situations, is you're starting to see communities come together. You saw an event there the other day, a community meeting where there was folks from East Palestine that came down, and folks from East Palestine are communicating with some of the residents and activists there. We've seen that with Flint residents trying to help the residents of East Palestine. Uh, you know, you can't be on your own little island because wherever this happens, the government's not helping. The corporations certainly aren't helping. So you have to become the experts in chemical contamination, government regulation, the legal stuff. There's so many elements to these situations. So it's very helpful when communities come together. So the people who are just dealing with this brand new can learn from the people in East Palestine who are unfortunately having to deal with this 2 years in. And, 2 minds, 3 minds, 10 minds are better than one. So communities need to come together. And frankly, if the politicians are not doing anything to help you or give you the information you need, then you need to protest them. You need to vote them out. And I don't care, it's obviously going to be Trump. Obviously, he's not big on regulation, but we need to talk about not only what regulations we have, but are they being enforced? Because it doesn't seem like they're being enforced. If a chemical plant could have 3 fires, now a 4th, they're still open. I mean, what do they got to kill the whole damn town to shut them down? And that's Ashley, who's in East Palestine, saying we learned from Flint. So we will stay on this. Jordan does important work. I would agree. So if you want us to do more of this work, please support our work. There's a lot of outlets out there that send email after email asking you for money, donations, and become a member. But for the most part, they're sitting on their ass, bloviating about the same shit everyone else is talking about. We do a little, we sit in the studio a lot too, because we can't afford to be on the road all the time. But as far as I know, we are the only independent, keyword, independent. We don't have money coming from Biolab or Norfolk Southern or Goldman Sachs or Pfizer. Our funding comes from you, the people. And our audience is working class and poor. So not everyone could throw in, but for those that can, you could support us for as low as $5 a month. And I believe it was Hannah who mentioned it. Right now, I'm trying my best to arrange a trip to North Carolina because there is literally hurricane victims sleeping in tents, damn near freezing to death. Let me repeat, hurricane victims, the FEMA money has run out. They were temporarily located, but FEMA is running out of money, in part because Republicans don't want to fund FEMA. So now they are out in tents. This is America. There's hurricane victims freezing as we're heading into the worst part of the winter. So we want to get on the ground there and expose that story. It costs money. I'd love to go down to Georgia at some point and cover this. It costs money to send me, a cameraman, the flights, hotels, rent a car, food, all that. So please, it's important to actually cover what the corporate media is covering up. We need to cover what the corporate media is covering up. So sign up, statuscoup.com/join. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out our other videos. We've been on the United Healthcare CEO's murder and kind of covering it the way the corporate media should be, not just giving a play-by-play of the shooter and what happened and the timeline. How about covering that these healthcare companies are killing millions of people? The 68,000 people die from lack of healthcare. That's a low count. There's more people dying from lack of healthcare. There's a whole lot more people having their lives shortened because of the evil for-profit healthcare system and the horror stories circulating on the internet now of people denied cancer treatment. People, being denied treatment a day before their surgery that was supposed to be covered. This is a capitalist hellscape we're living in. And again, we're not saying go get your guns and shoot down CEOs. Nobody's advocating for that. But the media, hysterical that people are a little gleeful and happy that, the for-profit healthcare industry finally got a taste of what it's like, to be on the receiving end of this. Maybe the media should wonder, why do so many people hate healthcare companies? Why would people be happy at something as dark as somebody being gunned down? Maybe it's because a lot more people are dying because of people like Brian Thompson and United Healthcare than Brian Thompson. So you don't have to advocate for violence, but we're all human. And if you've lost people due to the evil for-profit healthcare scheme, if you yourself have suffered from it, you might not feel so sympathetic. Thank you for watching. Check out those videos. We'll have more over the weekend, and we'll see